I have one song on the album it's an acoustic song, and it's me at rock bottom. It is me questioning my existence. We're getting into some darker themes with this song, and Kellen Quinn features on it. And he's a good example of an artist that sings about these things and does not romanticize it. He always has this little positive spin. And he threw a positive spin on his verse to end out this song. I did not expect it to come because I have nothing in that song that is good. It was a bad, that was one of those songs that I was like,
You're listening to Our Space with Matt Fatisse.
Hey, thanks for throwing on another episode of Our Space with Matt Fatisse. If you haven't heard recently, there's been some changes coming to Spotify for podcasters, and I just want to get this out of the way really quick because as a podcaster, it's so hard to grow a podcast, especially on one particular platform, right? If you look at overall listens, views, plays on your podcast overall, you can have an episode that does amazing, but maybe one episode did really well on YouTube and not so great on Spotify or Apple, or one did really well on Apple, but not so great on Spotify. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Spotify is making some changes and they're going to start adding plays on podcast episodes. And I think they're doing this because they want people to consume podcasts on their platform and for creators to promote podcasts on their platform. And it can be really deceiving, right? Because a lot of people that you talk to on the show look at things like views, followers, all of that, and decide if they're going to do a podcast or not. But like I said, those numbers aren't really true overall numbers because there's so many different platforms. The point I'm getting at is if you are listening to this on Spotify, a huge help is going to leave a review, the 5 stars, and interact with it on Spotify, because that is going to continue to help grow the show and book amazing guests that we've been able to talk to, right? So if you can go and leave those 5 stars on Spotify right now, that would be a huge help. If you've ever enjoyed one of my chats with any artists, please do that. Same thing with Apple. It goes a long way. Leave 5 stars, leave a review, and on Spotify, click the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment. All of these things go a long way in helping grow the podcast. And if you talk to any creator, like I said, podcasting, one of the hardest platforms to grow. I do it because I love it. I do it because of my radio background. I do it because the artists that I get to talk to. I do it because I want to continue to grow the scene. I want fans to be able to interact with artists and gain new personal connections with their favorite artists as well. I want you to discover new artists. Today's artist that we're talking to, you may have seen him on social media. ISITJOSH. And originally, I actually thought that Josh was a social media influencer, and I didn't know that he did music. So this conversation is loosely based around that and the challenges of artists that do really well on social media and promoting their music. It doesn't necessarily always translate into those things like Spotify streams, like we just talked about. So if you are going to go and check out his upcoming album, go and pre-save it on Spotify, and remember to listen to it on Spotify. Those little vanity metrics, as much as we all hate vanity metrics, they do help. So I'm really excited about this chat. If you haven't checked out ISITJOSH's music yet, or even seen him on social media, please do it. Let's get right into the chat where we talk about social media, mental health, and so much more. Here we go. Thanks for joining us at another week of Our Space with Matt Fatisse. Our guest today is ISITJOSH. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So first off, I need to ask, you're doing the social media thing, and as a musician, what started? Like give me the background on ISITJOSH. Were you making some silly videos and thought, oh, okay, I should start writing some music. This is something I always wanted to do. Or did you start out with music and then build an audience afterwards?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something I struggle with, actually, because a lot of people will be like, oh, that's a TikToker who just makes music or whatever. But no, I've been playing music since I was 11. I've been in bands since I was 12, 13, grinding out the MySpace scene, which then, turned into like the weird, YouTube era where the comments were completely unmoderated and sorted by new and just unhinged. And, we went through the Facebook event spam era with other bands. I've just been grinding it forever, and then finding these little pieces of moderate success, and then something would happen, like, a pandemic shutting the world out and suddenly, things like that. And no, so truly I've been grinding it out, and I turned 30 and I thought it was over. I thought I was done. I thought I had my, I gave it my all, but then I got lucky. I started posting on TikTok out of boredom and caught on real quick. But then, like you said, it became a thing where I had to then convince my followers, like, hey, by the way, I've been making music for 20 years and this is what it sounds like, and it's still a constant battle. So that's kind of how it started.
You mentioned that you thought it was over at 30. Why did you think that?
Well, I was in this post-hardcore band. I was singing, and we wrote this single, and it got 1 million streams in no time. And for us, that was insane because our last album, I think, got like 1,000 streams total. And so we got 1 million streams and all this hype, and all these things were going to happen. And I thought this was my big break. And I think I was 28 at the time, and then the pandemic hit and it shut down immediately after everything. So we couldn't tour, we couldn't play shows, we couldn't go to studios. Like, it was just like we just were on hiatus. And then, one of the band members had a kid and one of them quit, and we just fell apart. And by then it was like, okay, that's it. So I jumped full force into the corporate world and did that for about 2 years before being like, no, I can't do this. Yeah, this isn't for me. And then I just jumped right back into it now. So
are you a full-time musician then, just working on this?
Yeah, it's definitely a different lifestyle than when I was, a salaried marketer at a corporation. But yeah, no, I took the risk about 2 years ago and quit my job.
Good for you, by the way.
Thank you. And, for anyone watching who wants to follow those footsteps, my advice is always make sure you're ready and make sure you have, a solid base, because it is brutal. You're at the whim of algorithms and things like that. But yeah, I was able to quit my job and do this full time between the content creation and the music and things. It's kind of just taking what I can get when I can get it, and just living a life full of experiences now, and making sure that, by the time I'm 45, I'm not sitting back going, oh man, in my 30s, I wish I would have gave that one more shot,
So let's talk a little bit about the content creation before we get into more of the actual music. And you have an album that's coming out very soon. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like, you mentioned the MySpace era and the Facebook events and doing all that hustling, doing that hustling and using social media since its inception has always been a good tool to promote your music. How did I know the pandemic started the big explosion with TikTok, mm-hmm. but how do you use social media now to promote your music and sort of counteract the whole, oh, you're a TikTok musician? Because back in the day, you could use MySpace to promote your music and you weren't a MySpace band. I guess some people were considered MySpace bands. Yeah. But, for the most part, I mean, every musician needs to market themselves in one way or another, right? So how do you balance that, being an influencer versus being a musician just trying to promote your music? Great question.
It is one of the most difficult balancing acts I have ever experienced in my entire life. I will be at shows watching my favorite bands, and I'll hear them on stage say something like, "Just so you know, we're a real band up here. We're not TikTokers." And I'm in the crowd like, "Oh, okay, well," but it's very difficult. And I think what it comes down to is making sure that you don't fall into that trap that most bands are in. And I think I'm lucky enough to have been on like the influencer content creator side of things before this ISITJOSH solo project, because they fall into this trap of, oh, I have a music video, I'm just going to post snippets of that 50 times. And then after that, I'm going to post a show flyer, and then this and this and this. And what ends up happening is you're just selling to your audience nonstop. And you almost become an ad in itself, your whole profile, And so I think, one thing that I had to do is I used to promote other bands a lot. in the emo scene and the pop punk scene, and I found that was kind of confusing a lot of people. So I kind of had to pull back on that a little bit, and just kind of focus on my music, but then make sure that I'm still making those jokes within the emo scene, the emo umbrella. There's still stuff I can riff on and do skits and comedy and things that don't involve me directly plugging, a band's new album or something for promo. And then just kind of slipping it in and making sure that you stay authentic and you don't just become a robot press machine that is just putting up advertising materials and, making sure I don't just lip sync into a microphone every day for 7 days and throw it up.
Do you find that there's more backlash from the band community or from the fan community? And I'm using backlash loosely here, because there's people that give that title of TikTok musician, and that term seems to be a bit degrading. It's meant to like push you down further, right? And I've talked to other artists on the show in the past that have a significant, following on social media that have been put into that box, but they're like, guys, like I play shows, I tour, right. I'm doing all of these things. It's just I've had a break on social media. I've built up a following, but I'm bringing people out to the shows. Like I'm a real musician. I'm not, just writing songs for the internet and then not doing anything else. Yeah. That's it, right? I'm not writing 30-second clips or whatever.
Writing hooks specifically for a TikTok skit, things like that.
Yeah. So do you find though that there's more backlash, and once again, using that loosely, from other bands, or is it from your audience? It's like, oh, you're not a real musician. I just see you on my feed.
Yeah. And I don't want to give this as well, I kind of have two answers to that. One, on the band side of things, just with my job and with touring and content creation and, all these things I've been lucky enough to do in the last couple of years, I've met most of my favorite bands and probably most of my listeners and fans' favorite bands. And I've become friends with a lot of them. And, 99% of them are excited to hear what I'm doing. And they'll ask me advice. Like, yo, how do I do that? How do I make my TikTok do that? Should I get on Threads? I was giving advice to a band about if they should get on Threads or not. I said, absolutely, you need to be on Threads. But what I find is some of those legacy bands are the ones that will do that the most. It's those bands that are, unfortunately, maybe riding the end of this emo resurgence and feeling a little insecure about, their future and things like that. And then they're seeing these new artists come into their scene where they might be playing as the legacy headliner. Well, these openers are coming in. And, that's when you start seeing the shade getting thrown from the artists. I don't really see it, one-on-one, hanging out and stuff like that. It's more when you've got a band that used to be big, kind of wasn't big anymore and is now really big again. Those are the ones who are really fighting off those TikTokers.
Yeah, they're kind of like they've got their built-in audience already from 20 years ago, and now they don't need to really build it because they've built up that reputation. Exactly. So they don't understand. It's kind of the old grandpa boomer mentality of like, I don't get these kids anymore.
Yeah, ever since all those bands got that email from When We Were Young Fest, I feel like the vibe just changed. And they're like, oh, wait, this is cool again? Like we can go headline in front of 40,000 people. Like we're not letting anyone else up here. Yeah. But then on the fan side of things, no, I think I don't run into it too much. I run into a lot of like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. I just saved it. I didn't even know you made music. And then I'll go to their account and they've been following me for 3 years. And I'm like, how did you, but I won't so much get hate. I'll get the random private profile with a anime girl as their profile picture. And they'll come in and say something like, this is trash, but it doesn't really affect me. I think if you're a musician who wants to cringe bait, I can think of a few, musicians who use a lot of cringe bait where they are purposely making their videos and themselves look as cringy as possible. And those people welcome all of the hate. And I think that those are the types of people that kind of maybe poison the view of what we're doing on TikTok a little bit, and trying to promote our music, because you see enough of those videos and you're like, okay. And then the first time you see someone open your mouth, you're like, he's about to sing. It's like, I'm not even gonna, nope. Like, once you've had enough bad experiences with that.
Like, I've been through this before. See you later.
Yeah, you see the camera like pulling out really fast on this person and they're getting ready to sing. I'm like, I'm not even going to watch this. And I'm a musician. I already know what's going to happen. You're going to say some like mildly offensive lyrics that might tick up, and you're going to start a comment war, and you're going to sit back and be like, yeah, I did it.
Yeah, I got some extra streams.
Yeah. So I think that's detrimental for the scene. And I think that that's causing some disconnect between, viewers, fans, and the musicians and creators.
Let's talk about your album now, because, separating the content from the music, you have a new album coming out on it's May 30th, right?
Yeah.
A collection of short stories about the heart. So when you were putting together this record, is it quite literally the title, where this was just I picture, but looking at this title, you sitting in the room and writing a little scrapbook. I don't know why I picture this a lot since I was a kid. Anytime someone told me they wrote like a book or a song, there must have been one author or something like that, there were stories about them that I locked myself in a room for 30 days until I finished this book. And so when I hear that, that's what I picture.
Were bleeding on the page.
Yeah, I didn't eat anything but crumbs of bread for 30 days until I finished this masterpiece. Look. So that's kind of what I picture. But, were you just writing short stories and then like, how can I turn these into songs? And that's the, piece of, is that the theme of the album? Or was it just sort of like, I'm writing a song, all these songs are just gut wrenching and emotional, and this is the perfect name for an album?
Yeah. So kind of a mixture. I have, my EP that I put out was called Chapter 1, and it kind of set the stage for this thing where, I'm very into writing, not just music, but poetry. And I always want to write a book and things like that.
Do you lock yourself in your room eating nothing but breadcrumbs until you finish it?
I'm not even, just, running out of ink and dipping my quill, under the candlelight.
That's exactly what I pictured.
My nightcap on. No, this album, being in this industry where we need to be releasing singles at least every 2 months, you cannot do what we used to do and just, here's an album, 2 years later, we'll see you again. That's just impossible. And so what it was me writing stories. I've always been very narratively driven when I'm writing my lyrics, versus throwing a bunch of metaphors. I'm pretty literal. And I think that just comes from growing up with emo and pop punk. But I was just writing stories. I was battling depression. I have bipolar disorder. I've got just a slew of things I deal with. And that's kind of where the record starts, getting out of this relationship that I was in and trying the dating scene. And I was writing these stories of what's happening. And it wasn't expected to come together like this. I expected a couple EPs to drop. But as time went on, that went from meeting someone to falling in love, and then all the things that come with that, and then something horrible happening, and all of that crashing down around me. And then, how am I dealing with that, as well as my mental health on top of that? And so it became this thing where I wrote a collection of short stories of what was happening with my heart over the last 2 years. And it wasn't until really towards the end of it where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to cut these songs. I'm going to put 18 songs on an album, and I'm going to call it a collection of short stories about the heart, because a label would never let me do that. They would tell me, cut it to 12, and so it did. It was a bunch of random stories that I was just able to kind of say, you know what, this tells something. And if you listen to the album front to back, it kind of feels like, like you're kind of feeling snarky and sassy and you're dating around, and then you can kind of feel yourself falling in love. And by the end of the album, you are in anguish. You are broken, and it is a sad time. And I'm glad that the album was able to shape out that way. It really does change as it goes and follows that story.
Now, I know you touched a little bit on mental health over there. and I've seen some stuff from your posts. You know, you've talked fairly openly about your mental health. How has that worked into your songwriting? I know towards the end, you know, you talked a little bit about the anguish in the songs towards the end of the record, but was this record written before, after? Like, have you incorporated any of that? Like, how does that play into this album?
Most of it during. In fact, there are two songs. I don't know if I want to call them out, but there are two songs. One of them, I had actually just left the hospital, and I had been up all night, and I went and recorded a song for the album that same day. And, you know, my eyes were red and puffy, and I had been crying. I just had this horrible night, but I was able to put that emotion into that song. And I don't think that that song would have turned out the way that it did had I gone in there and just been like, okay, sad face on, let's go, you know. And hopefully that does help resonate with people. But I always want to make sure that when I'm writing about this stuff, I'm not romanticizing it, that I'm, you know, making sure that I'm being open about it and I'm talking about what I'm doing, but I'm not romanticizing it, because I think that's a big issue in this scene specifically.
That's a really good point that you made, because yeah, there's a lot of really sad songs, and I feel like, you know, a good, healthy, positive way of looking at the sad songs is, hey, someone out there understands it or gets it, or I can relate. You know, if you don't have anyone in your life that can relate to some of the things that you're going through. And I remember, you know, even just when I discovered the genre, throwing on a record, and for me that record was The Used in Love and Death, and being like, oh, okay, you know, like someone out there gets it. It's not someone in my family or friends or anything like that, but it's like they put these emotions into a record that it feels like you can, you know, connect with that. But the romanticizing portion of it is where emo, even as a teenager, always lost me. You know, for the longest time, even songs like Ohio Is for Lovers. Now looking back, I love that song. Back in the day, I wasn't crazy about it because it almost felt romanticized. I didn't like the themes of slitting the wrists and all of that, right? So how do you balance that romanticizing versus putting your emotion into a song?
Yeah, I think the big thing is something I've learned in therapy, and you know, things like this is depression and mental health issues do not always need to lead to self-destructive tendencies. And I think that's where a lot of these lyrics go. You know what I mean? This has happened. These are the feelings I'm feeling. So this is how I'm going to react to it. And I'm going to react to it by insert metaphor here about something horrible. You know, it's always a crash out. It's always, you know, like you said, like some of the stuff that they would talk about in those older used records, like cutting wrists and things like that. And I think it's more important to talk about the feelings of what's happening. How are you processing it, right? You know, things like that. I'm never going to sing about a way that would lead to self-destructive tendencies, I guess. And that's one of the big thing is, especially around men's mental health, a lot of us don't go out and get that help. We just kind of want to dump on a friend or something and be like, hey, thanks for being my therapist, you know, for the day. And yeah, I think it really is. It's just it's a balancing act between, you know, these moments of how do I get this across without also being like, you know, you can kind of picture me writing this in a very moody room. Yeah, exactly. And it's a hard balancing. And I think the reason it's so hard for me to answer is because I'm still figuring it out myself. Because I grew up listening to it just like that, you know, that's how it was. And I think it's a problem that I've recently recognized. It's not something that I've noticed for a long time. In fact, I used to love self-destructing. It was my favorite thing to do after a mental breakdown, you know, have a quick crash out and then just pick it up from there. So
those self-destructive behaviors can sometimes feel good and be therapeutic in and of themselves, but then when you're done with it, it's like, okay, why did I do that? You know, and then pick back up all the pieces, right? So,
and those are the parts that don't get written about. You know, you hear these lyrics about, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna, crash my car through your window. I'm gonna drive off a bridge. I'm gonna just horrible things. But then there's never ever a resolution to it.
No.
And then you're stuck sitting here going like, oh, my idol is singing about these things. My idol is hurting himself because he is dealing with these things that I'm dealing with. So now I'm going to do that. And what you don't realize is that person is probably working on themselves in a private capacity that you may not know about. And now you're only mirroring their worst behavior, So.
Do you find that maybe the genre is moving a little bit more towards what you're talking about? Because I feel like as we get older, we get to be, smarter, more emotionally mature and all of that. And now, as you're saying this, I didn't think about this before our conversation, but I'm starting to think of all of the records that sort of have started to have a resolution at the end. Like I think of one of my favorite records, one of my favorite emo records, modern emo records is Spanish Love Songs, Brave Faces, Everyone. And if you go through that record, it's just an entire crash out of like millennial trauma. It's talking about not being able to afford housing. It's talking about, careers and job loss. It's talking about school shootings. It's talking about basically every single millennial crash out. And then at the end with Brave Faces, Everyone, it just kind of wraps up with, life's not here for us to figure it out. Let's just put on a brave face and get through it. Like it's tiring and this is our reality, but like, hey, we don't need to figure it all out at once. Life's long, and Brave Faces, Everyone. I'm like, the most depressing and emotional album that I can possibly think of to be released in the last 5 years has this weird, defeated, optimistic ending at the end of it. And like, that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, totally. And I think I can say this now because I'll be announcing it soon anyways, but I thought it was really cool. I have one song on the album it's an acoustic song, and it's me at rock bottom. It is me questioning my existence. We're getting into some darker themes with this song, and Kellen Quinn features on it. And he's a good example of an artist that sings about these things and does not romanticize it. He always has this little positive spin, and he threw a positive spin on his verse to end out this song. I did not expect it to come because I have nothing in that song that is good. It was a bad, that was one of those songs that I was like,
He saw the song and he was like, I'm going to throw some happiness
did, and
onto
he sent
it.
that back, and I was like, you just changed the whole vibe of the song. And now at the end of it, you're talking about themes of like, I'm looking in the mirror. Why didn't I see this before? Like actually this person I'm running from is someone that I love. And he puts these themes in the song and then it closes out. And so I love that. I love the discussion of something that's happening and then just a nice resolution at the end. Even if it's not
like
nice.
He was that therapist for you.
In
that moment.
I'm like laying on the couch, like listening to and I've noticed just bands like Silverstein and even like the Used. I was watching them on the Emo's Not Dead cruise. And listening to some of their newer songs, I'm like, wow, you went from like small, sharp, pygmy sized, to singing about like positivity, like things that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's cool to see. And I think a lot of those artists now have grown up and they have done the work. They've gone to therapy now. Most of them have children, or are married. And
you think about some of those guys writing those songs back in the 2000s, like some of them were 16 years old writing that. You know what I mean? And now they're adults. Like you said, adults with children have gone to therapy. And like the way that the scene is kind of moved with, especially the legacy bands, I feel like it's a lot harder to write about teenage trauma when you're 40 years old,
And I hear some bands doing it still, and I'm just like, oh my God. Like, I will hear lyrics specifically that talk about that. Yeah.
This is where, like, when bands evolve after 15, 20 years, and people are like, oh, you don't sound like you did back then. Like, this sucks. Like, get back to your roots. And it's like, their roots is when they were 16 years old singing about the girl that broke their heart. They've been married for 15 years now and have 3 kids. Like, it's just not the same.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite songs melodically from last year. I don't think I'll call them out on this, but it's one of my favorite songs melodically that dropped, and I loved it. But the lyrics, man, were just like singing about like high school heartbreak and like all this stuff. And I'm like, you are 45, singing about this. And, I'm just sitting like, I do not relate, but man, is this catchy.
Which song was this?
I think it was called Be Okay, by a new artist in the scene, Petty Hendrix.
Okay, I don't think I've heard it, but
great, incredible song. I mean, I burned a hole in it. But the lyrics are like, we were young and dumb. We were full, you know what I mean? Just like, let's leave this town. I'm like, oh my God, man. But it's so good. But yeah, it still exists.
I feel like the only time where that really works now, because I can still listen back to those songs about it for the nostalgia sake of it. Like I can listen to a modern baseball song and they're talking about, high school breakups and be like, totally cool to sing along with it. But I'm kind of like, oh, okay, that was them in that moment. At least you knew it. They wrote that in high school, and it kind of gives you a bit of that nostalgia effect. But yeah, writing songs now, it feels a little bit weird. Writing about high school, especially with everything going on in the scene and that has happened and been uncovered in the scene over the last 20 years.
Like prefacing a verse with like, I felt this way 25 years ago, but not today. Like,
you got to put some notes in the in the actual record, some show notes in the record.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kellen Quinn on the record. For an album like this, how did that come together? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, me and Kellen played a show together. Not Sleeping with Sirens. He actually played a solo set at this festival I played. And I believe it was in Houston or Dallas, Texas, very far from me. And we chopped it up a little bit in the artist area. I was playing right before him. And we just chopped it up a bit. We're able to meet. And then through the Emo's Not Dead cruise, shout out Chase Daniels, the Emo's Not Dead barber, who's on all the cruises and has become a good friend of mine. He's actually the barber for a lot of artists, like a lot of artists. And we became really good friends. And I had an artist that was going to feature, and he actually took a year and then sent me an email and said, I've been absent-minded. Sorry, I can't do it. And I was like, okay. So, and so then I reached out to another artist, and then unfortunately the LA fires happened, and then they had to go leave for tour. So they couldn't do it. And then I was stuck here with a song that had no verse, and I needed it that week. I needed someone who could do it in a week. And I hit up Chase. I was like, yo, dude, you think Kellen would do this? Like, and do it in a week? Because they're really good friends. And he's like, he would. And so I just sent Kellen a message. And I was like, Kellen, I have an insane ask. I have a song. 2 people have dropped off. I have an album coming. I literally need this now. And he's like, here's my email. And within a day, he was just like, I will have this for you. And then, he ran into some family problems, some health issues that he had to deal with. And he kept me up to date on it. And then as soon as that was all done, he finished his song and sent it to me. I think it took a week total. Most professional, easiest artist I've ever worked with. Kellen, you're a dream to work with. It was real nice, real quick, real easy. And I think obviously that is one of those benefits of being a content creator first, because I'm able to reach out to some of these bigger names with bigger artists with a little bit of social proof behind me. I might not, I don't just have a brand new Instagram account. I'm like, hey, would you like to do this with me? I can approach someone and they can see, oh, this guy's got, 250,000 followers. Maybe I'll take him serious, or, So I do leverage that a little bit,
Of course, you have to. That's the whole point of doing it, especially if you want to leverage. Like if the whole point is to get your music out there and that's your product, then, that's what you have to leverage. It opens up some doors, which is one of those things that I never understood about people being like, oh, it's a TikTok band if you're just a real band. So that's where, kind of asking about that. I'm just curious because, you're opening up those doors for yourself. And at the end of the day, that's what you got to do.
Yeah. And TikTok, and, I know you're a content creator as well. And I don't know if you've experienced it. Some have not, some have, but TikTok has gotten very hard to get views on. I used to consistently get 1 million views consistently, or at least 100,000, I would consider 10,000 a flop. Now I'm happy to get 1,000. You know what I mean? I'll get 1,000, then 100,000, then 1,000. And they just need everything to be viral. So I've kind of have switched my focus to Instagram, and that's kind of the place where I'm more able to be like, hey, I'm a real human being, and a real musician. And because I'm able to post my photos and they see I'm on tour and they see these other things that TikTok doesn't really see, so
TikTok's very much geared for the For You page.
Yep.
So if you're like, I can follow people for years on TikTok and never see their content.
Yep.
And I learned that fairly early on. There was one creator, it was like a dad and son. Like when I first got the app, I'm like, oh, these guys are hilarious. I want to see more of them. I'll follow them. And then within a month of scrolling, I wasn't really seeing that content anymore because my For You feed started to figure out what I actually like.
Yeah.
And then it was like, they're probably one of the first accounts that I followed and I haven't seen them in years.
Yeah. And there's case studies on the algorithm. Me as a marketer had to read them from my past jobs, and like TikTok, one of their proprietary, like the reason their algorithm did so good, so well and beat all the other competition is because they thrive on the chaos. It's so unpredictable. You get on TikTok and you have no idea who's going to pop up on your For You page. You have no idea. It could be core, it could be weird core, it could be a skit, it could be an artist. You have no idea. But 99% of the time, it's not going to be someone you followed. It's definitely not going to be someone you followed back in the day. Those people need a viral video to reactivate their account. And even just things like, how am I supposed to announce that I have a full-length album coming to my TikTok? There's 175,000 people on my TikTok. How do I reach them? I need a 3-second hook. Okay, so now I got a 3-second hook. You guys are never going to believe what I just finished. Whatever it could be. You'll never believe what took me 2 years or whatever, And now I've got them hooked. But then now I've got to get them to listen to me talk about my album. If you're not following me, who cares? Scroll away. If you are following me and you're following me for my memes, who cares? I'm scrolling away. I've now failed that initial test. I'll maybe get 1,000 views. That's it. Instagram, totally different story. These people are following my stories. They see my day-to-day. They know what's going on with my life. They know I've been working on this. It's totally different over there. Totally different.
I've definitely felt that early on, and that's where I put a lot of focus on my Instagram, much more than my TikTok, specifically for that reason. When Reels first came out, I was pretty late to the whole. I mean, I had a radio career before all of this, and
you've got the
radio.
Voice.
Thank you. When I was doing radio, it's so much. Radio is just so much of like, the topical stuff. So what's happening day to day in the news or in entertainment or whatever, right? So I was making just a whole bunch of stupid, silly videos or meme videos about whatever was trendy that day. And none of that really took off. So I actually built, not none of it took off, but like a good few thousand people that came to me for those videos that probably don't give a shit about my emo videos. Yeah. And then all it took was that one, when Reels came out, I just was like, I made an emo video to be silly. Just thought my friends or my, family would laugh at it. It blew up, and then started building like the Instagram side of it started blowing up more than the TikTok side of it.
So much faster too.
Yeah. And then it was like, oh, okay, cool. Everybody on the Instagram side, like TikTok was going as well. And I was building up TikTok, but TikTok kind of plateaued. Whereas Instagram, I was getting like DMs from people and comments. And I was like, oh, cool. I actually feel like I'm building a community on Instagram versus TikTok, where it's very transactional of just likes and comments and whatever.
Perfect word. And a good example of that is like ratio, engagement ratio, right? I say this, I am guilty of this. I will watch a TikTok 4 times until I'm crying because I'm laughing so hard. I'll send it to 3 of my friends. I'll just scroll. I won't double tap. It's just, it's not because I'm being rude. It's not crossing my mind as a creator myself. But Instagram, I feel like will look past that metric, because I'll have a video with 15,000 views, and it's some picture of a show I'm playing, or a reel that didn't perform well. It's got 15,000 views and 150 likes. You would never see that on my TikTok. You would see 1,500 views on 150 likes. But I feel like Instagram is better at recognizing, like, just because people didn't double tap doesn't mean they're not interested. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'll have more comments than I will likes, or I'll have tons of shares and tons of saves, but just not a lot of likes. And one of the best things I did for my mental health was hiding my likes a year and a half ago. I don't even look at them anymore. So I look at my view counts occasionally. If I have like a video get into the millions, I'll be like, all right, what are we looking at? Like, oh, we crossed 100,000 likes. That's pretty sick. But other than that, it's like, I don't care. I just don't care anymore. And I wish that TikTok had that feature, because I can tell my content has, if it's not gotten better for other people, it's gotten so much better for me. I'm so much prouder of what I've put out. I don't cringe at myself anymore. I can let people follow me, like meet a stranger and be like, yeah, follow me. I don't care anymore. Like I'm proud of everything I'm putting out, because I'm not worried about metrics anymore. I'm just putting my things out there, and thankful for Instagram, because TikToks.
I love that.
Scary.
I love that you said that you don't cringe anymore, because I feel like that's the one hurdle that a lot of people have to get over when it comes to posting. Like, I remember going into my producer's studio and showing her my phone and being like, do you think that this is cringy? Be honest with me, because if this is too cringy, like over the, like, I'm like, I know it's a little bit cringy, but is it a lot cringy? Like, am I going to embarrass myself? Because if I'm going to embarrass myself, I'd rather you tell me than me hit post.
Yeah.
And then I hit post, and it ended up being one of those posts that ended up getting over 1 million views. And I'm like, say I overthought it. And meanwhile, you know, it ended up blowing up, and I'm like, I'm glad that. And then that was one of the ones that everybody started copying afterwards, and it was like word for word, and it started a trend, and it was just kind of like, oh, okay, what if I didn't post that? You know what I mean?
It's wild when that happens, when you start a trend. I started a few trends in my short career here as a content creator, and it's wild, especially when it's your voice speaking or ranting about something, and people lip sync it, and you can go through and scroll through like hundreds of these videos of people with your voice, and they're like lip syncing. Like,
I was worried about this being cringy before I hit post, and meanwhile, everyone just loves this so much.
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to the human nature. Like, we are all a little cringe, you know what I mean? And that just speaks to the authenticity when you put something like that out there. You're like, okay, yeah, this person's really putting this stuff out. I think that some people toe that line where they try to be cringy in a way that's more like edgelord, controversial. You know what I mean? And that stuff always leaves a bad taste. But no,
because you know that it's almost like it's not even honest or like genuine. It's just, I know that if I say these things, then I'm going to get a certain portion of the internet to agree with me and another portion to argue with me. And now I'm starting to debate, and I'm going viral. But I'm also pushing this weird, shitty agenda that, whether you believe in it or not, it's just meant to get clicks.
Yeah, and not only that, I feel like the fan base that those types of people garner end up being that type of like army fan base that people look for. But also, it's like, do you want an army, that's attacking everyone in your comments, and like, I see that, and I think that it comes from that. It comes from the energy the creator's putting out is the energy that their followers are going to give out. And next thing you know, you've got someone who went viral and has 200,000 followers of people who are mimicking their cringy, insane behavior that they're doing on TikTok, but they're just translating it to real life,
Yeah.
And I've seen creators and I've seen musicians who have come out and been like, listen, I used to think that this was cool, and now I'm not, because there are kids walking up to me and being like, oh my God, I love your music. And then they'll say something completely inappropriate, and he'll be like, oh, I didn't realize I'm actually like shaping a generation here,
Like they don't realize that this is actually a skit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you'd be surprised, You'd be real surprised at how many people. One of my good friends, Brad, I'm going to mess up his last name, Brad Padre.
Oh, yeah. I've seen his stuff. Yeah,
Scumbag Dad.
I loved his Scumbag Dad stuff. And
I'm in a few of his videos, and they're all riffing on this like kindness content, and it's all this cringe content. It's fake. It's literally these content creators and even musicians now will sit down and I feel like they'll Google like, what was the most popular movie of 1995 for children? And it'll be like the Goofy movie. And then they'll just be like, cool. So then they'll just get on TikTok and they'll be like, in 1995, the Goofy movie dropped, and I think it was one of the worst movies of all time. It's just, I feel like that is their content creation strategy. Like, and they'll just sit with it and be like, cool, I'm just going to argue with people for a few hours now and then go collect that check. I couldn't do it.
The whole mimicking content that Brad does is fantastic, because it's sort of it is, it's exposing that side of the internet that's getting clicks, but you don't see the behind the scenes things. And a lot of people don't realize like, oh, hey, yeah, like they're not really doing that good. They're doing it for click. They're what's the right word? They're exploiting other people
totally exploitative, yeah,
to get those clicks, which also isn't good, especially for the kindness content.
Yeah, you hear about those people that go into a restaurant and be like, I want, Brad does a lot of these, but I'm going to need to order 1,000 hamburgers. Like 1,000 hamburgers? We could never. And he's like, well, I'm going to give them away to the homeless. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, we'll make 1,000 hamburgers right now. And then, they'll be like, that's going to be $25,000. And he'll be like, wait, but I'm going to give them to the homeless. Isn't this supposed to be free? But you see that, like, you will see that. And I've seen articles of store owners that have come out and been like, this TikToker walked in and told me he needed 1,000 donuts. And I made 1,000 donuts and told him he needed to pay. And he punched the table and said, what? Most people give this to me for free. You should be so happy I'm doing this advertising for you. Where are my free donuts? And that owner was like, get out of my store, man. And, posted about this guy, like, this man just came in and demanded 1,000 donuts for the homeless. He's got a business to run. And that's the side of this kindness content that you don't see, which I stay very far away from.
I want to know, once again, kind of having that conversation of social media and then music as well. What has that done for you when it comes to fans? Maybe running into, like, you're very active in the scene and you're out at festivals as well and at shows. Fans coming up to you, what are those experiences like with your fans?
Yeah, so it's been getting better and better, and it's like at first it was people would come running up to me and Josh, can I take a photo? How are you? I follow you and I love your content and your corporate emo and I love your memes and you're so funny and this, and we would take pictures and it was great and I loved it. But at the end of the day, I'd go home and I'm like, man, I just put out a new song. So, but they're talking about my memes, but it was fine because I was getting something, I was like, I feel like I'm making progress. And as the years have gone on, it has now progressed. Like while I was on the Emo's Not Dead cruise, almost every fan that came up to me and said, Josh, I love your music. Like, I love that new song you put out, or I'm so excited for this. And it's like that you will see a different person. If you come up to me and you say, Josh, I love your content so much, I'll be like, oh, cool. Do you want a picture? We'll take a picture and we'll go our separate ways. If you come up to me and say, oh, I love your music. Next thing you know, I'm going, oh my gosh, what's your name? Where are you from? How long have you been? How do you, let's talk. Let's, do you want something? Like, can I give you anything? Like, I just get so excited when someone has crossed that boundary, and I'm seeing it more and more, especially now that I'm touring and, an album's coming and, I've worked with some bigger producers and things like that. So watching that shift, watching, my follower count has stayed at about 74,000 on Instagram for about a year, because what people don't see behind the scenes is I'll lose 1,000 followers in a week and then I'll gain 1,000 followers in a week. And all those 1,000 people who left, I'm not upset about. Like, go, leave, get out of here. Because
if you don't want to be here, get out.
Yeah, and these other 1,000 people who just showed up to replace you are here for my music because I haven't been posting memes, So that fan behavior has been amazing. And, I've played shows where I've been unsure. I'm like, does anyone here know who I am? And I've had a girl run from the back of the crowd all the way to the front. She made her own custom ISITJOSH merch with my latest Instagram selfie printed out on it. And, my last tour, watching people in anywhere, watching people in Oklahoma City screaming my words. I'm like, what is happening? This is something that happens to someone in their 20s, not, I just turned 34 not too long ago.
So we're about the same age.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, wow, I'm really getting a second chance. Like this, I'm not going to screw this up. I'm going to hit this as hard as I can. So that is why you see me at a lot of those festivals and things. I will go wherever the scene is. And a lot of people will give me flack because they're like, well, you're not in the pit and you're not doing this. And it's like, oh yeah, that's because I'm in the artist area and I've been networking for 5 hours. My game face is on. Like I'm trying to meet people. I'm trying to make industry connects. I'm trying to move my career forward. I'm 34 years old. I will go catch those bands some other time. I've seen them 20 times already. I'm going to park right here next to this producer and see if we can't lock something in instead. So. Yeah, that's why you see me at a lot of those events.
And that's, you're smart. You're working it out. Talking about music and that shift from content creator to music. What songs on this particular album are you most excited for fans to hear, and do you think you're going to get the biggest reaction from when it drops?
I know Joshville Part 2 will get the most reaction from my fans. Like, I have a group of people called the Gloom Squad, and they are from my Discord, and they're kind of like my ride or dies, right? And I would be dead in the water without them. Truly, the Gloom Squad are my ride or dies. And they've been here since day one. And Joshville was a song that I wrote a couple years back that had a little bit of a country twang to it out of nowhere. And I kind of leaned into it, and we called it Y'all Alternative. And I dressed up in overalls and a cowboy hat. And it was just a really fun thing for my fans. And now I've got Joshville Part 2, which continues that story. And we have a banjo in it. I mean, it's almost like real friends sat down and we're like, what if we wrote a country song? That's what I think that my inner fan, like the main ones, are going to eat that one up and just love it. But I have another song called Not Over It. And I will be using this as like the lead single. And it's a song about getting gaslit by someone you're in love with. One of my favorite things to do is to write a happy song and then just write the saddest lyrics over it. And I get that from Third Eye Blind. Third Eye Blind used to do that a lot. Semi-Charm Kind of Life is about a crippling drug addiction, and nobody has any idea that that's what that song is about. And this Not Over It song, the verses are me singing about like just being gaslit to the point where I'm like, hey, you could literally tear my heart out and step on it, and man, I miss you. And then the chorus is just like, nah, I'm not over it. I'm not over you. Like, let's fix things and blah, blah, blah. And then, by the end of the song, it kind of resolves and a sense of clarity comes, and we resolve the song. But that, I think, it's very pop rock. It's very upbeat. It feels happy. So it makes you want to just be dancing. And I think it's a great song. It's catchy. I'm really happy with how it turned out, just because I was able to sneak in what is probably the catchiest, like most modern song, but then also make it some of like the most ridiculous lyrics. Cause it's just about an oblivious person being gaslit like none other and love bombed, and just going along with it. Just, whimsical. What's that? I can't think of the term. Blissfully unaware of what's really going on. And so Not Over It. Look for that one. That's going to be a good one. Yeah.
I love that. And so besides streaming the album, how else can fans support you right now, especially as an independent artist and throughout 2025?
Yeah, so streaming and sharing obviously is the number one thing, but I think when you see me on Instagram, you might think to yourself like, oh, this is Josh and he's got all these followers and he's done all this work. And that thing I've talked about, how we don't double tap. Throw me that double tap, throw a little favorite, even if you don't have time to watch the video, maybe just hit that favorite thing, because I'm in this position right now where every ounce of support matters so much. It could be the difference between 10 people scrolling away that will tell Instagram to stop pushing my content out. So my biggest thing is, if you see me on socials and you see me out there, just throw that support, drop a comment and be like, hey, Josh, we see you. And that takes me so far. You have absolutely no idea. And then, if you want to keep up with things even closer, I've got my own ISITJOSH app where I post things behind the scenes. You can get it on the iOS store or app.isitjosh.com for the Android users and desktop users. And it's essentially an app where, I can post behind the scenes content, videos, unreleased music, teasers. And so that's a good place to a lot of people come and hang out. But,
I love that. I love that you have your own app as well. It keeps your dedicated base there, and then you control that algorithm as well.
It's great. Yeah. And it looks just like Instagram. So you'll be really familiar with it. You'll have your own profile. You'll be able to comment, reply. It's very cool.
So go and next time you see Josh on your algorithm, make sure that you're giving him a like, send it to your friends, and of course, stream the album out on May 30th. Now, Josh, one thing that we do on the show here, one of the key points when creating the show was to continue to grow the scene and show some love for the scene. So, you know, as yourself, as an independent artist working hard to get noticed by other people, do you have any other artists that you want to shout out right now that have been, you know, working hard or up and coming? And, you know, of course, people are going to check out you right now listening to this episode or watching it on YouTube, but is there anyone else that they should also look out for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's No Vowels, one of those bands with no vowels. Lightbringer is this post-hardcore band coming out of the Omaha scene, which is where I'm originally from. And they're working with my producers. And that's another story of someone who has been grinding. In fact, they played in some of my bands when I was younger. So I always want to recommend them. And then on the bigger side of things, they're kind of still, I mean, they're one of those bands that has like the occasional like lot of streams, but like they just have absolutely no following. And I have no idea why they're just not more popular. But it's an artist called Sachi. And it's like punk. I think they're calling it like grunge pop or something like that. It's what I'm doing as well. And so Sachi is really good. And you actually spell that SACE and then the number 6. So I'm just going to clarify that because I'm sure a lot of you are going to have a hard time finding that. And then in the Philly scene here, I got to shout out Daisy Doom and Cheer Up Dusty. 2 great emo pop punk bands here that are just crushing it.
Awesome, Josh. Well, go and check out Josh's new upcoming album. If you're watching this after May 30th, go and check it out. If not, go and pre-save it on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your albums. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Our Space with Matt Batiste. If you enjoyed yourself, please support the show by subscribing and leaving a review.